Thank you. Well, good morning. Good morning. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here. I've never been in Valencia before. And it looks to be a beautiful city. I can't wait to come back in better weather. That would be really terrific. So what I'm going to be talking about today is school, obviously, but also the maker movement. And some of you may have heard of the maker movement, and others may not be as familiar with it. But it's something I think that schools should be paying attention to as we move into this next industrial revolution. And I would love to talk to you and connect face-to-face with many of you the rest of the day. Jamie and I are doing a Meet the Keynote session this afternoon, and I'm also doing another session where I'll dive deeper into some of these areas and specifics about how this is happening in classrooms around the world. If we don't get a chance to meet face-to-face, I'm very easy to get a hold of. You can contact me on Twitter, you can email me, you can look at my website, sylviamartinez.com. And I will definitely answer your questions and talk to you after as the time goes on. So that was a terrific introduction. I happen to be one of those people who's had a career that's zigzagged all over the map. My degree was in electrical engineering, and I went to work in aerospace for many years. But then after that, I was a computer programmer, a video game designer, I was a software publisher, worked in nonprofits in student empowerment and student technology literacy, went back to school and got a master's in education. I've run nonprofits, I've published books, and now I'm an advisor at Stanford University to a group of educators working working all over the world, helping to promote this kind of change in their classrooms. And through all of those jobs, the focus has been on overcoming challenges and doing things that have never been done before. And the education that started me off was a very good education. I went to school in Los Angeles, where I grew up and where I still live. And I got an engineering degree. And when I graduated, there were a number of aerospace companies at Southern California, a number of aerospace companies I interviewed with, and one of them stood out in a big way. They said to me, we're going to be working on something that's never been done before. We're going to make a machine that can be in a submarine or in a jet plane, at the North Pole, under the sea. It doesn't matter the weather, the time of day. You'll be able to tell where you are within 10-meter accuracy. And this is something completely that has never been done before. Never in the history of navigation have you been able to know where you are in the world to this degree of accuracy. And it's going to change everything. It's going to be like the transit of Venus, the discovery of the compass, those kinds of navigational inventions that change the world. And so we went to work on this thing. And it turns out there were a number of problems that they didn't quite tell me about. The receivers that we had at the time weren't fast enough to do this. The satellites weren't actually up in the sky yet. The software hadn't been written, and the hardware that the software was going to run on didn't exist yet either. But we did it anyway. And to me, those kinds of invitations are precious. When you ask children, because I was a child, essentially, when I graduated from college. I didn't know anything about navigation or receivers. It wasn't my life's dream to work in that area. But when they said, we're going to invent something that's going to change the world, I said yes. I took that invitation. Not because I knew I could do it, but because it sounded hard. And with all the blind optimism of youth, which is a good thing. It's a good thing that children don't know that they're not supposed to do things, that they don't know things are difficult, because then they go and do them anyway. And in that job, we built the first prototype of the GPS satellite navigation system. And now I have one in my phone. I don't remember the world without it. How did we even live without knowing where we were all the time? And yet, it was practically impossible when we started this job. And what I realized was that all my education had prepared me for this, not by teaching me what I needed to know, but by preparing me to tackle questions that we didn't know how to answer. And in a lot of cases, what we did in that studio was more like my dad's auto shop than it was the science I'd had in school. And as I went on, I started to question that more and more. Why were we teaching kids so many things that weren't really useful in the real world? Facts that were going to change, ways of computation, ways of calculating things that were all going to change. And that's what drew me to education, is trying to figure out how we can make, especially science and math education, more real world. So when the maker movement came along, it was really interesting to me because it kind of connected me back to my engineering roots. And the maker movement, if you haven't heard of this, is a global revolution that's happening right now. It's part of this fourth industrial revolution, where the way we make things is going to change. And if you know your history, you know that the industrial revolution of the past wasn't just about the steam engine. It changed everything. It changed how people lived. It changed how they work. It changed religion. It changed politics, socialism, communism, democracy, all born out of the upheaval of the Industrial Revolution. It changed how we went to school. And we're still working from that model. But right now, things are changing. The way that things are made and bought and sold all over the world is changing and becoming more immediate. You can make what you need right now. Make it quickly, and the best part is when you do that, you can share it with other people. So there's this global brain that's working out these problems. So if you're a farmer who needs a moisture sensor in Mongolia, you might look on the internet and find something made by someone in Africa or anywhere else in the world. And when you use it and you figure out how to make it better, you can put that back online and share with other people. And this is happening right now. We could talk about the economics, how this is going to change business, but really, my focus now, and our focus, all of us, is education. How can this change schools today? And my partner and I, Gary Stager, decided to write a book to build a bridge between this maker movement and schools. Not to tell teachers what to do, but to connect a movement that has an incredible tool base and technology base with schools that are looking for authentic purposes and real-world problems to solve. And by the way, everything I talk about is on the website invent2learn.com. There's a lot of resources and information up there. And also, when we published this book, we decided, well, this is a very maker thing to do. We can publish other people's books too. And a lot of educators came to us and said, I've been doing this in my classroom before it was called the maker movement. Can I write a book? And I said, yes, you can write a book. If I can write a book, you can write a book. And now we've published 10 books, mostly by educators who are sharing what they do in their classrooms to put the power of technology into students' hands. So when I talk to schools about the maker movement, I talk about a lot of different tools and technology, but we focus on 3 things. In our book, we call them game changers, the things most likely to change education: computer-controlled fabrication, physical computing, and programming. So computer-controlled fabrication, you've seen 3D printers by now. You're literally making something out of nothing. And there are a lot of industries where this is happening right now. Food preparation, that's a machine that's a hydraulic robot where all of the parts are printed out out of a printer at the same time. These are consumer goods are going to be coming fast and furious. These are shoes that you get your foot scanned. Not only do you get a custom shoe, but you can choose the design of the shoe. New materials are coming. Just because the printers of today print out little hard plastic things, that's all going to change. I was at the Rome Maker Fair a couple of years ago, and they were printing out things that felt like leather. The medical uses are absolutely fantastic. This little girl has an exoskeleton built for her in a way that was completely impossible just a few years ago. She can have those parts remade for her as she grows overnight and for pennies. They're printing kidneys and hearts. They're printing ears and noses out of cow cartilage. NASA is talking about 3D printing pizza for astronauts and the robots that are going to roll out of the Mars lander. This is going to change how we live. Back in the 50s, who could imagine we'd all have printers on our desktop and we could print out whatever we wanted? We will have 3D printers in our homes, printing out not only things that we buy off the internet, but things that we design ourselves. And the cool thing is we can give that opportunity for students today. There's all kinds of things happening in the world where people are using 3D printers. Museums are scanning in all of their artifacts. The Prado has 3D printed pictures for blind visitors to touch. Schools are using them to design and produce projects that tie into the curriculum, like this wind-powered car. You can make things for fun. You can make things that help people, maybe someone close to you, maybe someone far away, like Enabling the Future is a website that connects people who have 3D printers with people who need prosthetic devices. And it allows you to answer questions that you might not have thought about. Like, for example, if one opposable thumb is good, why not have two? It would be twice as good, right? Maybe. Well, let's try it. So you not only get to imagine these things, you get to make them and make them work. This is a working student project in a first-year engineering school, made out of very few parts, some sensors, some small motors, 3D printed plastic. And people are trying that out to see if maybe two opposable thumbs are a great idea. Because, the word prosthetics doesn't really mean replacing parts that are missing. It means enhancing human capability, not just replacing. So when you add to that computation and feedback and control, you get a whole nother range of options for technology projects. These are all real projects. Robots using Arduino microcontrollers. That's a glove that reads sign language with sensors and that goes down to a computer and that translates hand motion to speech. This is a pollution sensing gown. The sensors in the gown read the air quality and take measurements and control the pattern of lights. And these are ballet shoes that track dance movements. You can see that all of these projects would attract different kinds of people with different interests, musicians, artists, dancers, people who want to do good in the world. And yet, each of them use the same precise engineering process. This is not dumbing down engineering to pander to, girls like sewing, so we'll do a sewable electronics project. This is rigorous engineering. Because, for example, this round purple microcontroller on that ballet slipper is an Arduino microcontroller, just like the blue square thing on the robot. It's just made in a different shape. It's made in a round shape with holes in the sides so you can sew with conductive thread, and your conductive thread becomes the wires of your circuit on your ballet shoe. There's a lot of projects going on in schools around the world, like this robotic sound-activated stroller that rocks your baby to sleep when it starts to cry. There are things you just do for fun. You can make this school built an automated irrigation system for the farmland around where they live. A lot of schools are using the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals as a framework for thinking about how to make the world a better place. Because all kids want to make the world a better place. They want to be superheroes. And these are capabilities that we can give them today so that they can be scientists and be engineers and be mathematicians, not learn about science or math, to have the experiences today that will power them and that will teach them how to be contributors in the future. This is a school in Hawaii who heard from local scientists that an invasive fish species was taking over the river behind their school. And they asked themselves, can they do something about it? And that sounds hard, right? How are you gonna fix fish? There's so many of them, and what does it matter if you fix a river? Does that really matter? but they did it anyway. The older students talked to the university professors and found out exactly what needed to be done, which species, how they could tell the difference. The younger students participating in building nets and rigging, so they actually caught the fish and then would sort them out by hand. And the invasive species went into the compost pile, and the native fish went back into the river. And then they measured. Then they did the analysis, what real scientists do, and they presented their findings to the university and said, we can make a difference. The percentage of invasive species went down as the students were doing this work. So I think the most important thing to think about is looking at students not as objects to change, but as agents of change themselves, so that students can change the world. And they can start today if we give them the tools and we open these doors to unlocking this future. So how does the maker movement help? How do these projects help? What's different? Couldn't we just be, putting on puppet shows or, doing the traditional kinds of projects we do in schools? I say yes, but. So I think there's something special about the technology opportunities that are available today. And part of it goes back to Seymour Papert. And Seymour Papert is kind of the father of the educational maker movement. He invented the Logo programming language for children, which was the first programming language developed to teach children to live in a mathematical world and express themselves in mathematical ways. And he said that if you use technology to make things, you can make a lot more interesting things. And you can learn a lot more by making them. And I'm going to add on to that and say, if you're an educator and you're watching children make interesting things, you can learn a lot more about their thinking. When they're making something that's visible, they're making their thinking visible. And when they're making their thinking visible, that's an opportunity for an educator to understand the thinking of the child, which I believe is the primary job of a teacher. Now, so I believe that maker, therefore, means you can do a lot more. You can make things today that work. You can make things you care about. You can make things more precisely than ever before. And, as Dr. Papert said, you can learn a lot more by making them. So, what's not to love? Shouldn't schools love this? Well, they should. But these kinds of projects can be complicated. They can not work. They can take extra time. They can go astray. And schools tend to, well, hate is a strong word, but love is a strong word too. Schools tend to dislike things that change the path, that take too long. That means we can't go on to chapter 12. But the problem is, that's not a problem. Just because something makes school uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. It's called disruption. Now, sometimes disruption doesn't feel good when you're the one being disrupted. But we can accept no substitutes for real experiences. Putting these technologies into students' hands means that they can open this door to the future. We have to resist things that dilute that. We have to resist magic wands that promise that these projects will be easy and quick. We have to resist canned projects with all the directions and perfectly laid out so that nothing ever goes wrong. There's never just one way. There's never just one right answer. And the interesting thing about students is if you let them come up with different answers, they will. And they learn that their ideas are valuable. And that empowerment is so crucial. So schools need to embrace uncertainty, even if it's scary. They need to embrace learning in its real form, where we don't actually know the answer. And by doing that, they embrace the future. So, now innovation doesn't throw away what works. This isn't just all about new. We're so excited about new. We have to remember what we're passionate about and why we became educators in the first place. Now we can look at research. We could fill this room with research papers that say, what are the best things that students do in school? What helps them achieve the highest? well, hands-on activities and relevant and integrated into real life things. But the number one strategy that this research study, and this was a cooperative study by Stanford and the Lemon Center in Brazil, said active learning practices, where students are actively involved in building and making and working things to help them learn science and technology, was more significant than any other variable, including student background, including prior achievement. We cannot throw away research like that and just chase after the new thing. Research says that this maker movement helps girls become interested in computer science and engineering and stay interested. Because the reason that girls like science, by and large, is that they feel they can change the world. It's not because they love calculating or they love test tubes. They want to use what they learn to make the world a better place. We can look back on giants of education like Piaget, who said knowledge is a consequence of experience. You know, Piaget didn't say, well, knowledge is a consequence of having been taught, because that's not true. We have to give kids experiences. And you know, you talked about the skills gap. Why has it turned black? Oh, there it is. You talked about the skills gap. I believe there's an experience gap too. There's a lot of kids who are not getting real-world experiences that they can then build on to learn the theoretical parts of education. And Maria Montessori said, never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed. That's a really profound statement. We can't overhelp kids. If we help them too much, we're depriving them of the learning. And she didn't say, well, we shouldn't help a child unless we're really busy and we have to move on. It's a natural urge for schools to keep moving because we've got so much to do. We've got too much to do. We have to be focused like a laser on what's really working and get rid of what's not. We can't keep the entire curriculum for the past 300 years and then sort of stuff the new stuff into tiny little cracks and crevices. We have to be persistent, and we have to be sometimes brutal in saying this is no longer necessary. And that conversation happens all the time between people like yourself who are thinking about what the future looks like. So I think innovation respects past, present, and the future. Universities are stepping up, I believe. They're saying, for example, MIT is saying, we want to see what you've done. We don't only want kids who are good at taking tests. But really, when I hear it is when I talk to kids. And I'm glad I'm on the same side as Stanford and Harvard and Piaget and famous people. But when I hear kids say things like, everything is a lot more simple to make. I can do things really quickly now that I know how to look at stuff. That's an exceptionally profound, a simple but profound statement. It combines not just maker philosophy of you can do things, but mindfulness, craftsmanship. Being able to look at something and feel like I know what to do is a power. You know, and I hear people all the time. I go to a lot of technology conferences and people say to me, oh, you're right, technology is so empowering for kids. They love clicking on stuff. And I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. Not at all. I believe that empowerment comes from students being able to do powerful things. Powerful things that are meaningful to them and meaningful to a community. And I think this is a cycle. And a lot of people talk about digital citizenship. I think they're also missing the point. If we're just talking about the rules and the punishments of what will happen to you if you go to the wrong place on the internet. Citizenship is belonging to a community that values you and that you value. It's a two-way street. And I think there's this cycle of being trusted to do something, and when you step up and actually do it, you gain a lot of respect for yourself and motivation to do the next thing. And that's empowering. It's a cycle of belonging to some place that cares about you. You know, kids are learning today that the internet cares about them. The maker movement has lots of places to go where you can talk to other people who are interested and passionate about what you're passionate about. Even YouTube does that. Kids know that there are people out there who care about their ideas if they can simply communicate them. You know, that's why everyone runs over with a camera and uploads it to YouTube, because other people are going to see it. It might get 1 million views, it might only get 2, but that's okay. The students are being taught and they live in that world. And if school doesn't recognize that, schools are going to be left behind. I also know that empowered students are not possible. It is not possible to have empowered students without empowered teachers. Teachers who are in control of their own classroom and their own curriculum, where they are making moment-to-moment decisions about what's going to happen next and what the important things are, where they're not being told what to do minute by minute by someone else, where they're co-creating learning with the students in their classroom, because that's how the real world works. When Gary and I run professional development, and we do this all over the world, we always start with teachers making things. We ask teachers to take off their teacher hat and put on their learner hat, and be selfish with their time and feel what it feels like to be frustrated, to feel like they don't know everything, to wonder, to ask a question. Well, I've made this, now what else can I do? And then think about how that happens in their own classroom. We run one session, and by the way, you're all invited to this. It's happening in July in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is a city just outside Boston on the United States East Coast. We do 4 days of teachers making projects. And most teachers make projects that they had no idea that they could make before. Big projects like this Chinese dragon, a lot of electronics. We bring in Arduinos and microcontrollers and things for the teachers to use and do mini tutorials. But we never sit and lecture them. And the teachers start to think about how that makes an impact on their classroom. I had a teacher last year come up to me at the end of Constructing Modern Knowledge. After 4 days, she said, "This is going to change how I teach." I was like, well, that's fantastic. You're going to be doing wearable computing. And she's like, yeah. And they'd done this amazing shoe that lit up when you ran and kept track of your exercise. And this is like, you know, before Fitbit and everything. And she said, no, she said, that's not what I mean. I am going to do that, but that's not what I mean. She said, last night I sat up in bed, wide awake, because I remembered what happened the first day. So the first day we asked the teachers to brainstorm their projects, and she told me they brainstormed a project, she joined a team, they sat and they started to talk about what they were going to do, and they talked 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 more and they talked even more. And she said, I stood up and I said, I'm going to take a little break, and she walked out. And she wasn't so sure she really liked the project anymore, and she wasn't so sure she liked the people on her team anymore, and she wasn't sure what she was going to do. She walked outside, took a deep breath, got a cup of coffee, walked back into the hotel, and we do this all in a hotel ballroom, and said, my team rushed me. They jumped me and said, we've figured it out. We've got the right tools. We've got the right technology. We're back to our original idea. And she said, snap. I turned around 4 days later. We'd done this amazing thing I didn't even know I could do. I didn't know anything about programming. And here we did it. And she said, but last night I sat up in bed and I thought, when do my kids get a cup of coffee? When do they get a break? When can they take a breath and look at their work and think about it and then come back to it? She said, if she was looking at me, she said, if you tapped me on the shoulder as I was walking out the door and said, get back to work, which is exactly what I tell my kids when they're goofing off, get back to work, she said, I would have gone upstairs, packed my bags, and gone home. And she said, last night, I thought everything in my classroom needs to change. And I think for a technology conference to have that kind of impact on an educator is really a striking thing. Because it's not about the technology. It's not about the stuff. It's not about shopping or buying the right things. It's not about building a special makerspace to put them in. It's really a stance towards learning. And it's a stance that gives kids the mindset and the tools to make sense of the world, because that's the biggest part of the maker movement, is making sense of the world and to take charge of the world, because it's their world. and for us to facilitate that, to step out of the way and give them the tools and show them that they are the future. And I can't think of a better group of educators to make that happen. So I thank you very much for your time this morning, and have a great rest of the day.